join in. Whoops, timer is going off. Okay, so that must mean it's 7 o'clock. So Buju Ani Gretchen Sands Gambler District Dishnakas Pekedunong and Dunjaba Mjikendoda Manishna Bakwa and I am Gretchen Sands Gamble. I am the Elementary Indigenous Education Special Projects teacher for the Limpton Kent District School Board. And I just want to say miigwech to everybody for joining us tonight. This is our second week of webinars, and they've been going really great. And I should knock on wood, but it's been so awesome to have so many different stories being shared and so many different perspectives being shared with educators and administrators from our school board. So we just wanted to ensure that the voices of Indigenous people from the communities in the Limpton Kent District School Board area are being shared, just to give different insight to the educators and to the administrators, to just give an idea of what the students or the Indigenous students and their families are facing, you know. So it's just so great to have so many educators with us and administrators with us throughout this webinar series. So tomorrow is actually our last day, so it's been so great to have so many people joining in. Just a little bit of housekeeping here. We have a spot at the bottom of your screen there that says Q&A. That's where you can ask a question. So what we've been doing, Loreina, is we've given time for our presenters to speak, and then we save about 10 or 15 minutes toward the end so that the participants can ask any questions. Is that okay with you? Okay.
Yep, sounds great.
Awesome. Okay, so if you have a question, you can ask that there and we'll address it toward the end, okay? So I'm just so excited tonight to have Loreina with us. So she is an Anishinaabe from Aamjiwnaang First Nation. She has a Bachelor of Science from the University of Guelph and an Indigenous Women in Community Leadership Certificate from Sir Francis Xavier University. She is a marine and freshwater biologist by profession and spent the first 8 years of her career working for Federal Fisheries and Oceans as a fish habitat biologist. And I'm so excited just reading that. That just makes me so excited. Sorry. She's been working as a senior advisor with the Provincial Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks since 2009. And she was an elected councillor for Aamjiwnaang from 2012 to 2016 and October 2020 to the present. Loreina currently carries the council portfolios of housing and economic development. She's also been the Indigenous trustee for the Limpton Kent District School Board since 2014. So she's super duper busy, it seems like, all the time. So Loreina is a strong advocate for Indigenous students and families, and I'm so glad that you're here with us tonight, Loreina. So I'm just going to hand it over to you. So miigwech for being with us tonight.
Miigwech for having me. So I'll introduce myself again in the language. Ani Buju, Loreina Rising, Dijnakas, Aamjiwnaang Dunjaba, Wawash Keshidodam, Anishinaabe Kwayandao. So I'm Loreina from Aamjiwnaang, and my clan is the Deer or the Hoof clan, and very happy to be here. And I had just typed out my same intro that I had sent to Gretchen just for to have it there, and realized that I forgot to say that I am also a product of the Lambton School Board. At the time, it would have been just Lambton. I went to Divine Street Public School and went to Skits, Sarnia Collegiate, and had a fantastic time. So I'm a product of this school board, and went away to school and then came back here to work because this is my home and I love it here. So miigwech for having me, and happy to work on behalf of students and council, work on behalf of the Aamjiwnaang Bindazajig, or the community members, and really kind of put my heart and soul into advocating. So thank you, and miigwech. A little bit more about me, and this is a little bit of the reason why I don't have a super fancy slide presentation. I do a lot of gardening, and it all started because my little guy, who's not so little anymore, but there's that picture of him in the middle. He loved to be outside when he was little, and every time we get home from daycare, he wanted to stay outside. And so if I figured if every night I was going to be outside anyway, that I should start being a little productive with my time. So I decided to take up gardening. And I talked my mom into letting us put a garden in her front lawn, kind of like the concept of the victory gardens from the World War II. And she said, that's fine as long as it looked pretty. So we do a combination of vegetables and we add flowers and pots and different things so that it's really more of an experience than it is just about growing food, although we do grow food as well. And I'm never quite able to plan it so that I don't have an abundance of any one thing at any one time. You'll see the picture in the middle is my little guy with the zucchini harvest, and that was probably 1/20th of the zucchinis we had that year. Just seems like everything comes ripe at the same time, and we have lots of it. But it also shows that we really like flowers. I live in a multi-generational household with my mom, and there's my son a little more recently. And you'll notice in both pictures, my son is wearing sports-related gear because he's also into hockey. He used to be into soccer, baseball, and lacrosse. Right now he focuses, I think, more on hockey, and we're looking forward to getting back to it once things are a bit more normal after COVID. So, and he loves Little NHL. That's his Little NHL sweater. And I have 2 cats, and we have guinea pigs and a hamster too, but my cats are most likely, you may see one of them over the course of the meeting, because if I'm in a meeting, they have to come and see what's going on and introduce themselves. So you may see my cats, and they actually show up quite often at board meetings. So that's kind of funny. So to bear with me if they come along, I'll introduce you to them. So when I was talking to Dallas about, topics and potential for, what we could share, and I said, what about the Indigenous cultural iceberg? And he said, that's great. You want to talk on it? And I said, oh, okay. Because I have a lot of ideas, and I'm going to try and coalesce them all into kind of this, fairly short presentation. But we'll start with, and I don't want to take away from any of the wonderful presentations you've already had. I got to sit in on one of the other days, and you've had some amazing presentations over this week and last week, and it's been really exciting. So I don't want to take away from those, but, for the purposes of my presentation, I have a bit of a definition of what culture is. And the dictionary definition from Merriam-Webster, you can look it up online: the customary beliefs, social forms, and material traits of a racial, religious, or social group, or, which I like a little better, the characteristic features of everyday existence. That's kind of nice, such as diversions or way of life shared by people in a place or time. Okay, so that starts to get a little closer to home when we think about what culture is. But for me, I still have a hard time getting my head around it because way back when, and I think when I was in school and then when I went away to university, to me, culture meant practicing Indigenous traditional things like dancing or ceremony. And I was raised in the church. I am a member of the St. Clair United Church, which is which is Protestant. So raised in the church. And, so I thought, well, if I don't practice ceremony, do I have culture? And I really was thinking, probably not, I can't talk about culture. But it wasn't until much later in my career, as lots of people do, you progress and you learn things and you start to do self-reflection and kind of understand yourself. And I really started to think about more and more as I was learning. And I was teaching Indigenous cultural competency to my colleagues at the Ministry of Environment, and started to realize for myself, like, whoa, culture is so much bigger. And there's so much related to how I live my life, how I connect with family, that really is about Indigenous culture. And I didn't realize it. So, going through and growing up in a school I call Divine, it was a little bit of a rough place. And I say that from my perspective because it wasn't a good thing to do well in school. So my challenge was dealing with all of the teasing and all of that pressure to not do well in school. But I didn't really care. I was like, I still liked school. I liked my teachers and I liked the topics and I loved learning. So I had to find a way to deal with those pressures that kind of place value on not doing as well in school. And then when I went to Sarnia Collegiate, I threw myself into extracurricular activities because there was school, which was awesome, but it was also a place to learn new things. So I joined a ton of clubs and sports. So I did swimming and badminton and very short season of cross country because I'm not a runner, but and tennis and clubs. I was in environment and student council and drama and band, and just really connected with a lot of people and really found others who also put value on doing well in school. And I really latched onto that and was excited. And throughout my whole school career, my mom always said, when you go to university, such and such and such. So it was always when. It was never if you go, it was always when. So in my head, I was always planning to go to university, but I also knew that I loved home and I loved Sarnia. I wanted to come back. Sometimes I thought about, different careers. I thought, well, what would make sense with the plants and what can I do? And I love biology. I love marine biology, but can I really do that here? Should I be a chemist so I can work for Dow or Imperial? Should I be an engineer? And, because it was more about what can I do to be close to home? Where a lot of my other friends were all thinking, what can I do to get out of Sarnia? And I was saying, what can I do so I can come back? And it was such a different way of thinking. And I felt kind of weird, felt kind of odd. Should I be trying to move away? But I didn't want to. And when I went to university, I did well. I, of course, graduated. But the first year of university, I had a hard time being away from home. It was hard to be separated from family, be separated from community, to be separated from, kind of that connection here. And I called home every day. Back then was before we had these unlimited long distance bills. So my mom paid a lot of money in phone bills. So I don't know if anybody went to school back in that time. It was really expensive to call long distance. And then as my university career progressed, I spent because that's where I was called. Some people can't wait to get away and party it up at school, and that never was me. I just
think we've got Loreina frozen for the moment.
Okay. Yeah. I was wondering if that was me or if
it just wasn't me. I just couldn't wait when I could. And I've just switched slides. Did it show up? Can you guys see?
Just to let you know, Loreina, we lost about 15 seconds of you where your audio was cut out there. So if you want to just backtrack a few seconds to your last statement, that'll be a good segue into this slide.
Yes. Absolutely. So what I was saying was, I was wondering what was wrong with me. And I didn't really understand it until I started to teach more about cultural competency and realizing that culture is so much more than the tip of the iceberg. So the Indigenous cultural iceberg, and you can find lots of these graphics online. This is just one I got from Miss Marissa Manitwabi's website. And I liked it. Some of the items spoke to me. And you can find lots of variations of it online. And I started to understand a little bit more, and hopefully you can see that just a bit better. But the tip of the iceberg, as you know, icebergs have a small bit above the water, and then they have a large piece that all goes under the water. And as you know, we think of the Titanic, you can see the little bit of the iceberg, but it was the big piece of ice under the water that really sunk that ship. So there's so much more to culture that you can't see than there is on the tip. So in the tip of the iceberg, we see things like, dancers' regalia. We see art. We see things that ceremonial objects. We see history, like historic modes of transportation or housing. In this area would have been, the wigwam. On the plains, you would have seen more of the teepees. So we think of all of those things as culture, but there's so much more. Underneath, you see belief systems, stories, family ties, values, things that people have as their individual dreams and aspirations related to how they've grown up and their traditional values. We see indigenous clan systems and relationships, in interaction and knowledge and value of plants and animals. We see, family lines, like that genealogy and the relationship to the natural world. And you can have all of that culture without ever being an outward portraying someone who wears regalia. So I know that my son has a lot of these from just being here, living in the community and being raised in a multi-generational household. But he, other than when he was one, he has never danced in regalia. So, but I would always say he does have connection to culture because we're here. This is it. Even for us to garden and connect to the land and have that connection, he's got it. So what are these examples? So the connection to land and home, and I always look to myself as that example of, wow, why was I so connected? Why did I want to be home when I was away at school? Why did I feel that draw to be home? And part of that is culture. We were raised to connect and be here. I will tell a story of, in one of the service groups that I was volunteering at, and a lovely older man who was retired from the RCMP, lovely, like best intentions. And he is a lovely, lovely man. But he said, you know what the problem is? And I said, what? He said, with the northern communities. And I thought he was going to talk about land and returning land and sovereignty and lots of things. And he said, the problem is we have to get the kids educated. We got to take them all out of the north and bring them down to the south to get them educated, and then things will be better. And I was like, I said, am I on candid camera? Did somebody say that out loud? Because we tried that with residential schools and it didn't work. But he was dead serious. He thought the solution is to remove them from their home and their land and their family, teach them in the South, teach Southern values, and then things should be better. And I still shake my head and go, but he was so awesome. He was such a lovely, lovely person. He is a lovely person. But that I recognize that that's the way a lot of people still think. They don't see that connection and value. So from an Indigenous perspective, we have that connection to creation, even if, so for myself, someone who attends church, and we still have that connection in a way that I think sometimes the monotheistic religions don't see things the same way. So, and I use the example of, because we're not the Indigenous culture is not the only ones that have connection to creation and recognize that things have a spirit or an energy. So when we lay tobacco to give our thanks for a harvest, or for the taking of an animal for subsistence, or to lay our prayers to the Creator, we are connecting to that creation. We are realizing that we are part of a whole. We are not, kind of man having dominion over the earth, which is kind of a different, very colonial, very Western way of thinking. And there are other cultures that are the same. There's the concept of prana, chi, the Shinto, in Japan. And I really realized that when I think it was 2 years ago, and maybe some of you watched on Netflix, it was Marie Kondo, and it was about, organizing, all very well and good, but a lot of people hated it. There were lots of negative comments on Facebook, negative things, because her concept was touch the item and see if it sparks joy. And if it does, keep it. If it doesn't, thank it, and send it on its way. And so people were like, I'm not going to thank an item. They couldn't get their heads around the concept of something might have an energy or a value in and of itself. So that was a very, why a lot of the Western thinking had a hard time with tidying up with Marie Kondo. And to me, I really connected, because from an Indigenous cultural system, that resonated with me, because we are always acknowledging the spirit of something else. I'm not worshiping that plant for giving me a tomato, but what I'm doing is acknowledging its spirit and acknowledging that it's what it's given to me. And so that really resonates. But I recognize that is not the same in many other ways of thinking. So, Western ways of thinking, or different religions, and that's okay. But what we ask is that you understand the way we think, and understand, so that you can, be better educators and understand why certain things happen for the students, or why they're thinking a certain way. And that's what I mean by understanding of similar cultures. We're not the only culture that connects that way, or sees ourselves as, in a holistic way, as part of creation, as opposed to, apart from it. And honestly, looking forward, I think that is our way through, getting, in the coming days and the coming years, if we look to 7 generations and still, being able to sustain Earth, is the only way we're going to get there, is if people start to understand we're part of creation. We aren't just controlling it. So we also have Indigenous perspectives on water and how sacred it is, understanding why, students, may connect to water ceremony, or have great respect for water, as opposed to just thinking it's something that you drink, it sustains us, and and it's only for recreation. There's lots of other connection to that water, and knowing that we have to really be grateful for that water, and the waters of Mother Earth, that lifeblood of Mother Earth. With respect to connection to family, so we're also not the only culture who sees multi-generational households as very common. But I will think of even my own neighbors. So the first neighbor that way to the south, their family are always over, so the grandkids are always there. The next house down is an older mom, her son, and her grandson is there almost all the time. And the next one is, a mom about the same age as my mom, and her son lives right next door, in the house right next door. And if I go the other way, my uncle lives right there, and his grandkids are always over, and his, outside of COVID, but his grandkids always over. And then 2 houses down from that, they look after their granddaughter. And then the next house down is another multi-generational household with a mom, the adult daughter, and the grandchild. So there's just so many examples of, and that's just the few houses up and down from where I live. And of course I live in a multi-generational household. So there's such a connection to family, and with that larger family and connection, we also find trauma, as you've heard in many other presentations about that, intergenerational trauma we're all living with, connected to residential schools and colonization. And, acknowledging that even though, say, my son didn't go to residential school, nor did I, but my grandma did. And our family suffered, that ripple effect of that. Because my grandma had a hard time with some of her parenting. She was abusive at times, even though she was very religious and loved her whole family. And that was hard on my dad. And he was turned to addiction. And while, near the end of his life, he had pulled himself out of that. He died very, very young. I was only 5. And that really affected my brothers, who were only 11 and 12 at the time. And both of my brothers struggled with addiction. And my oldest brother, passed away from a drug overdose. And my other brother, thankfully, has kind of really been battling his addiction and has been sober for 15 years. So, very, thankful for that, and the organizations that support him. But through that, my nephews have suffered that trauma of the loss of their dad. And then, and I have one nephew who struggles with addictions. And sometimes, even when I was working in Toronto on housing and we were dealing with a lot of social things we were trying to fix and understand Indigenous culture, and there were lots of people working in the field who, oh my goodness, all these things are coming on, sorry about that, who had never, didn't know anyone ever who had suffered addictions. They hadn't even ever lost a family member through death. And they, their circles were smaller, and they hadn't ever experienced these things that come with connection to family and a wider extended family. And, so quite often with Indigenous children, while they may seem they are thriving, they're in school, they're doing sports, and they're wonderful, they still have had to deal with things, and they sometimes grow up quite quickly. And the example I use is my son. I can use lots of lived experience from my own family. I was away working in Toronto, and my mom's sister passed away, quite suddenly. And, my mom had to go and be there like right away. And it was kind of late at night, and there wasn't really anyone to look after my son. So he was like, "No, Grandma, I'm coming with you." And he went. And so they were there. They had to wait for the ambulance was there. And then the police stays. And then they had to wait for the funeral home to come. And there was family there, kind of processing those last goodbyes before the funeral. And he was there the whole time, and he understood, and he was comforting my aunt's children. He was saying, "Feel that, feel her presence. She's still here. And can you feel that, even though she's gone from her body?" He was trying to comfort them and really understand death. And at the time he was only 11. So actually, he might have been 10 at the time. He was still quite young. And, that's that, things you don't know as a teacher. You may not know that a child has gone through that or seen some things. And for other kids, it's lots of, things that are way, way worse than dealing with death. But it's important to keep that open mind about what the kids have been through, because that last point, they are resilient, but we want to understand kind of what it is they've been through. And another example that I use, and not to call out my son's teacher because he's got wonderful teachers this year, but there was an example of a project that my son just couldn't do. And the project was, do a project on a place you want to live anywhere in the world. And you had to do pictures and do a write-up and all of this, a place you want to live, not your hometown. Because the teacher was, I think, trying to prepare them for the concept of, if you don't get a job in your hometown, you may move away, you may go away to school. He was really trying to get the kids to think outside that, much the same way my mom did and way we do with Xander when you go to university or when you go to college. I understand the thinking around that project, but my son couldn't do it. He doesn't want to live anywhere else but Amjanong. And I think of all the Indigenous students who are being told, the best thing for you is to get an education and move away. And as communities, I know as an elected leader, I mean, the best thing is they get an education and move back home, because we want that, they're great minds to be here and contribute to this community. And to tell someone who's so connected to their family and to their home and their, that the only option is to somewhere else, you want to live somewhere else. Like he just couldn't do it. Like there was nothing we could say to make him do that. If the project had been, tell me a place interesting in the world, maybe he could have, but it was where you want to live. And he had no interest. He doesn't want to live anywhere else. He talks about going away to school. He talks about college and different things. So he sees that in his future, but he doesn't see living anywhere else. And I won't rule it out. I'm sure as you grow and you learn, that happens, but I'm certainly not going to say that he shouldn't want to live at home in Amjanong, because I love it here. I chose to live here. When I when I came back from university, I had a chance to go and live in Vegas for a while because my cousin was there. And I thought, oh, what an exciting opportunity for someone who's, fresh out of school. And then I got the job with Fisheries and Oceans Canada in my field. And I literally had to think about it. I was like, oh, I feel like being young, I should move away and do something like that. But I want to stay home. I want to do this job. And so I took the job and I stayed home. And I don't regret a single second because I love Sarnia. And when I moved to the province, to the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, they gave me a choice of offices. They said Sarnia, London, Owen Sound, and Windsor. And I said, oh, I choose Sarnia. It's my home. It's where I want to live. They were kind of shocked that I didn't choose London. And I was like, no, I love Sarnia. And I don't know, those of you, I know we're a big board and people live all over, but one of the things that I cannot stand, because I have such a connection to home and to Sarnia, I can't stand when people talk disparaging about Sarnia. So yes, Sarnia has its challenges, and we want to hold, our chemical companies to account and make sure they use best available technology and make sure our people are safe. But everywhere has different risks, whether you're living near a nuclear plant or smog in a big city or different things, so we take those risks because of the connection. And if things are, the way that the historians are saying, which is the Chippewa Nation was practicing the seasonal round here in southwestern Ontario. And at the time of treaty making, when they were setting aside reserves, they specifically chose areas that were extremely important to them. It wasn't the Crown who said, you need to be right here at the mouth of the river. They said, no, this is one of the areas we want. Same with Kill Stony Point and Ajudena, the Stony Point, Kitchewanong, wanting to be at that place where the waters divide, specifically chose to protect those areas. And the Thames, and that's why we're here. That's why we have such a connection. So when people say, "Oh goodness, if you don't like it living near chemical companies, why don't you move away?" We're saying, "Well, why would we? We chose to protect this land. This is our home, And for the greater Sarnia, when people talk about Sarnia or use that dreaded term, I don't know if any of you have used it, they call it Sarn hole. I delete Facebook friends for using that term because it's a home. I choose to live here, and most of you do too. For those in this part of the board, and so it's disrespectful to disrespect your home. And a home is more than your house. It's your community and your place where you live, work, and worship. So, I just wanted to kind of make those points that it's much more broad. So as educators, what can you do? Well, one thing for sure is to connect with students and understand where they're coming. Doing a particular assignment, like my son's, live somewhere else assignment, or the one that says, and I still see this as I see grandparents posting it, do your family lineage of everyone's come from somewhere else outside of Canada, tell us your lineage. Well, some Indigenous children, they didn't come from outside of Canada. Both between their mothers and their father and their grandparents on both sides, they're all First Nations. They didn't come from somewhere else. So that particular assignment that is meant to highlight immigration is actually, if you look at it, it can be quite racist. So it's about connecting and figuring out why someone may have a problem with your material or assignments. And really it's about checking your privilege. So, if you can't make kind of snap judgments about what's going on, why some kid may not turn on their camera for virtual learning, or why a parent may not want them to, because you don't know their circumstances at home. You don't know if they have, other family members who are living there. They just, they're all sharing a kitchen table, or, it's just about understanding different circumstances and realizing that, it's not, this could be actually a cultural thing. Maybe it's a privacy thing, you know, and this extends to other cultures as well. They just don't want a camera on their home. And so it's about that understanding and knowing that, you know, that the values you may have are not the same. I know someone once told me that, you know, if you're going to be on Zoom, you have to have your own room, and you have to, you know, shut out all your kids and your pets and make sure they never interrupt. And I'm like, well, my room is actually in a pretty busy area in the house. It's at the kitchen. You know, I have my backdrop, which I'm happy about. I use that for all my Teams and Zoom calls. But I can't shut my cat in a room. I don't know if you've ever had cats, but they sometimes don't like it. And now my cats have learned how to open doors. So it's a knob door. My cats actually can get their paws and twist it, and they actually can open doors. So I don't always get to choose whether or not my cat's going to show up on a Zoom call. And if my son's coming into the kitchen to get something, he is. So, you know, it's not everyone has houses big enough to have separate offices where you can lock the door. And so, you know, it's about understanding. And so, you know, it's just about, I guess, knowing that that cultural iceberg is about so much more. And, you know, for me, it took me a long time to understand that, because when I was at university, some people used to ask me, they're like, "Oh, tell me about your culture." And I'd be like, I don't really know. I didn't understand, you know, what I could say or what I could share. You know, I would, you know, even though I used to, you know, take part in that, learning how to dance, and we used to do the corn dance and the rabbit dance and all these different dances that we learned from our Indigenous education leaders in school back then. But I still didn't feel like I was connected, because I wasn't practicing ceremony. So it's about understanding that it's about far more than that, and getting that sense. I'm trying to figure out what else I should say. Maybe we can go to questions, because I'm sure I'll think of more things as more questions come in. So, miigwech.
Loreina, this was so awesome. I wrote down so many notes, and you know, hearing your story and the way that you explain culture and what it means to you and to so many people and to so many students, it really made me think about it in a different way, you know, and so much of what you said, I was able to relate to myself and my experiences too. And, you know, I think that, you know, this was such an awesome thing for you to share. So thank you so much. Even thinking about like the multi-generational household, or that's just something that a lot of educators might not realize is happening, right? Or even the idea of families living, you know, right next to each other, you know, so everybody's together all the time too. You know, that's how it was for me too growing up. And I don't even know if that was something that my teachers knew about me, you know, or any of that. So it's just something interesting to reflect upon as well, right? And that connection to the land and to home, and that home is more than your house, right? There's so much there that, yeah. So it was just so awesome to hear of your experience as well. So yeah, the Q&A is open. We're just you can, if you have a question for Loreina here, you can put that in there. I think one question that I like to ask our presenters here is, maybe if you had some advice for educators or administrators, maybe that about connecting or with their students, or even something that you wish that your educators had known, or something about you or your family when you were a kid. Is there anything, some advice or something that you could give to the people here?
Yeah. Oh, there's my cat. He's making his appearance.
There he is.
I don't know if you can see him. Hey, Taves. He's named after the hockey player, Jonathan Taves.
Oh.
Oh, and he's not going to get down. Oh, okay. He hangs under the table and he won't let me put him down. Anyway, so I think it's about asking about those broader questions of family, because they just make assumptions to parent guardian, and that's the extent. And for some kids that is the extent, especially those who are in town to work and they didn't come with extended family. There's a lot of students who that is their family, but it's more about understanding kind of your family structure, because for me, the dreaded Father's Day cards. Every year you had to do a craft, and I never knew how, and I never talked about it. My dad passed away at work. He was an iron worker and he fell when I was 5. And so we were living in the States at the time, and my mom just she had myself and the 2 older boys, and she just thought the best time was to move back home with her mom. And and I have people I went to public school with, because I put it on Facebook about my dad passing away in April, when we have the National Day of Mourning for injured and ill workers. And most people said that they never knew. And I said, that's because I never talked about it. I wouldn't have known. Cards. I didn't have that. And, I wish that teachers knew to ask a few more questions about family structure, and were a little bit more, made that effort to hear it. Because I was quiet when I was in school. I wouldn't have said, hey, by the way, did you know, that my dad passed away 3 years ago? And I wouldn't have ever done that. And so, okay, my cat is doing that to the screen. Okay, buddy. Okay. And so I wish they would have asked more questions about that family structure, so that those kinds of activities could have been more appropriate. Or, I would have loved to, at Father's Day craft time, go to the Native Education Workers Office and do beadwork. I would have been super happy to do that. But it didn't work out like that. So, I just wish that the educator, my teachers, would have taken a bit more time to understand my circumstances, because I wasn't a super chatty kid. I wouldn't have volunteered
and
that
I think
information.
too, along with that, there is an idea of behavior, right? There's a certain kind of behavior that they're going to watch out for. But if you're a quiet little girl, right, who enjoys school and who enjoys doing all that work and isn't going to, put up a fight or anything about that, right? It might just be, oh, well, everything's great, everything's good, right? So, if they had taken the time to ask those questions, or to know a little bit more about you, right, that would be something that would come up, right? So yeah, language.
Yeah, and there was another topic I was going to talk a little bit about, and that might generate a few more questions too. But I was going to talk about, the Indigenous cultural iceberg and COVID. When we place such a high value on elders, we have so many multi-generational households, and a lot of into the Indigenous community is all about protecting the elders. And those early days when we were starting to hear about risk and how it affected age, and communities were making decisions to restrict their borders, close roads, all across Ontario, and you'd see it on social media. People who couldn't get their cheap gas and smokes were really upset, but it was for the community's decision to decide to protect their elders. And similarly with the social determinants of health, I think it's tragic that the social determinants of health are related to poverty levels and different things. But at the same time, the government made a great decision to protect Indigenous communities in phase 1 with the vaccination. And I know everyone feels different things about the vaccination and they're entitled, but for a lot of communities, that's what they asked for, because their priority was protecting elders. And for them, it meant protecting those that live with the elders as well. So for many of us, watched in horror as, all of these, some people have said they haven't seen their grandmother or their parent for months and months and months because they live in a long-term care home or a senior's residence. And I'm like, that, why don't you live together? Like, but that's me checking my own privilege because we have that option. And that's just something that we've always done. When my mom grew up, her grandma lived with her, and then she moved in with her mother. And so my grandma was here, and now my son sees his grandma here. Like, it's just something that we have always done. And it's hard for us to look and see, to hear about elders who've not seen family in a year, or they don't have connection to anybody local. Like, that really breaks my heart. And when it comes to COVID and the decisions that communities and families make, I think when we hear or see social media and people are going, oh, you have a 99.2% chance of surviving. Great. What about the 0.8? If you think of 1,000 people, how many is that? And name those people you're willing to give up, because we're not ready to give up any of them. And so, I just, even today, there's something circulating. I don't know if anyone watches Blackburn News, but, one of the construction sites put that on, and everyone's saying, what a brilliant, sign. And I think it's incredibly offensive. Like, what about the 0.8? Nobody cares about the 0.8 who actually die. And I don't think that it's just an Indigenous thing that we value elders. But sometimes it seems like that. And it's hard. And I think that's hard on our students because those attitudes get passed down to kids their age. And, so for those like my son, who's willingly given up in-person connection with friends during COVID, in order to protect my mom, the attitudes of healthy, single generation or just like parent and child type of households, who say, don't worry about it, we're healthy, we'll be fine. It's hard because, he wants to interact, he wants to, but we've made those decisions to not take risks. And so, I think in a COVID context, that's where the cultural iceberg really comes into play, with respect to connection to family and those decisions we make when something like a global pandemic happens. So.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And definitely the idea of the multi-generational families is something that, like I said, a lot of people don't understand, and they don't understand how different things like that, like sickness, affects a multi-generational family. So miigwech. Dallas has a question. He's going to turn his camera on to ask it.
Okay.
Hi, Loreina.
Hi.
Thanks for coming on to do a presentation. It was great. I loved it. You're so smart and you have so many good things to say. Such a huge background. A huge like just a ton of information, and I value that tremendously. So thank you for being on tonight. I guess. For in your position as the Native Trustee of Lambton Kent District School Board, I guess for when we tie culture into education, and these teachers and administrators, everybody that's on the call tonight, I just wanted to share a few comments about our youth and how they learn, and some struggle and some don't. We won't really hear from the ones that don't struggle, but we'll see from the ones that do struggle. And the thing is that both the ones that do struggle and the ones that don't struggle, they all have different strengths. And we have to take that and harness that and kind of help guide them in the right direction. With your position as a trustee, do you see and can you voice to our educators here that our youth, they do have a future, they do have abilities and strengths, and one of the things that I would really like to see is a change in education is to guide them in that direction for education, so that they can go pursue a career in education. there's a ton of people, you know, for me, I'm a big support for our youth. You are Gretchen, Jawan. There's a whole bunch of us that are in that line of work that really want to see our youth succeed. So with your voice as the trustee, I would encourage, you know, and really like to see that you you know, share with our colleagues in the board and push them to guide these young students in a direction of education, because I do believe that our youth will see Indigenous educators and want to pursue that profession. You know what I mean? Am I making sense? But I think that it's really important that we say you can do it. You can do it. You can bring your culture. You have the ability, and you can do it. We'll help you, right, and guide you in that direction. But I really honestly think that our youth could be representatives of our own school board and be a product of Lempton Kent, such as yourself. So just a few comments, but I thought, you know, maybe with your platform that you could support that, you know, with our educators in the board. Miigwech for being on tonight. I appreciate it.
Miigwech, thanks for those comments. And I think I bring a pretty strong voice to the board and like to press and make them think outside the box. And really, you know, sometimes it seems like I'm bringing and using, you know, my own experience or my own son, but really it's about using that lived experience. So, you know, and I often will use that example and go, you know, my son has really caused me to stretch and grow because, you know, I was quiet and loved school and you know, I used to, I think grade 2 and 3, I used to love to get extra homework sheets and bring them home because I like to play school at home. And, you know, that was like the last thing my son would do. But he learns differently and he has anxiety and we just, you know, have a whole different way. But what he does learn, you know, really quickly when he connects with the material and it's related to something he's interested in, he learns quickly. He's very, very smart. He just learns differently than I do. And so I use that as an example, you know, that it's about reaching all the students and students don't always learn in the same way. So I love to see things and hear it, and then I've got it. Whereas my son likes to see it, hear it, and then do something related to it, you know, with his hands, and then he's got it. And so that's where the value, I think, even for myself in school, I don't think I really would have understood land-based learning or what that really meant. But when I see it in my son and the things that I wish that he would learn and that connection and how to connect the material to things you're learning on the land, a lot like we do when we garden and things like that, you know, it really shows me that there is that place for a different way of teaching and not every student learns the same. And as we learn and grow and as we move and we get out of, you know, the industrial age, we keep moving and get closer and you know, through this digital age, you know, we'll really come to value that everything that's learned and everything related to the land, and actually having our students come back and teach that way and a different way of thinking. You know, I think that's going to be really important. Yeah, so miigwech for those comments, and I will definitely bring that forward.
Yeah, and I think that it's so awesome to have you on the board of trustees, because being able to share those lived experiences is so important, and to be able to share the stories of your son, right? Like that's how people, I feel, are able to shift their thinking and shift their perspective on things, is through hearing the stories from other people. And for teachers to understand, you know, that there are those different ways of learning, and you know, there are students who have such great strength in one area, right? And it might have to really be a change in how we've always done things in the education system. But I do see that happening, and I do think that it's a really good thing. And I think it's because teachers are, you know, making connections and forming relationships with the kids and their families, and there's a lot of sharing that's happening that way there. Okay, so we have some questions here. Let's see. Oh, Tawana Brooks. Oh, it's already been answered here. Yes. So, oh, do we have a student, Indigenous student trustee on our board? So you want to talk about that, Loreina?
Yeah, sure. Yes, we do.
Mhm.
And yeah, and that was actually brought forward by the student trustees because they saw the examples in the Thames Valley and I think one of the other boards towards Toronto. And so a couple of years ago, the board did allow that because the regulations allow for 3 student trustees anyway. And it was thankfully not a hard decision to get them to agree and come to that decision that we needed an Indigenous student trustee. So we do have one.
Great, thank you. And hi, Tawana. I see her sometimes when I go to conferences in Toronto, so it's cool. We have educators from other school boards with us here too. Okay, so John Howett says he thinks Dallas's point is a good one and gives great kudos to the Indigenous Liaison Committee, the ILC, and the board staff in developing the ITEP partnership with Queen's, so the Indigenous Teacher Education Program with Queen's University to develop on OTC, Ontario College of Teachers, teachers locally. So it's important to develop local teachers, right? And so that we have that Indigenous representation here in our school board. So yeah, so it's awesome.
Yeah, and just a comment about that. Like, I think it's amazing because the program designed to be closer to home. And I really, I want to say miigwech to those teachers that did it in the old way, where they had to go and spend summers at Manitoulin or spend summers in North Bay. And, and they would go away for weekends. That is so hard to be away from your family and to spend that significant amount of time because they felt so passionate about being teachers, but it's hard. So just this opportunity brought more locally to be able to have students, student teachers who can fit it within what they're already doing for work, which is amazing because lots of people also can't just stop working for a couple of years to go to teachers college, and to be able to stay more local, which also is so exciting because that creates that opportunity for them to want to actually work in our board, which is exciting because, when we look around, what we always want to see is greater representation. Students want to see themselves reflected in, who's teaching them. The same way we kind of press government and other levels that we want it, representative of the people that they are supposed to represent. It's the same with teachers and in any other profession. They want to see themselves there. So I'm so excited that we will have more locally trained teachers. I think it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I agree. I'm pretty excited about it too. It's so cool. Okay, so let's see if we have any other. Oh, we just have, yeah, Tawana saying thank you. So yeah, miigwech. All right. So I don't think we have any other questions. And I just want to say that it was so awesome to talk with you tonight, Loreina. And like Dallas said, you're so smart and you just have so much awesome stuff to share. And not just that though, you're so positive and you're positive about education. And I feel like, having you on the board, it's so great for the school board. It's so great for everybody, Indigenous students, non-Indigenous students, for the teachers, for the rest of the board, right? And anytime I've been in a board meeting, it hasn't been too often, but I've seen you taking time to educate the other trustees and the other people on the board. So that is really, really appreciated. And it's just so awesome to have you here with us tonight. So miigwech for sharing all this important learning for the educators and the administrators who are here today. And I just feel like we have so much more to learn from you. So I really look forward to any more learning opportunities that we can have with you in the future, Loreina. So miigwech, miigwech for being here tonight.
Awesome, and miigwech for having me. I really appreciate it, and I'm always happy to share. So miigwech.
Awesome. Thank you. And I want to say miigwech to everybody, all the participants with us here tonight. Thank you for taking your time tonight to join us. Tomorrow is our last day. So we have at 3:45, let me check my notes because I forget right now. At 3:45, we have Dennis White-Eye. Wait a minute, that's not right. I'm sorry. We have, Summer Brizette tomorrow at 3:45, and then we have Dennis White-Eye at 7 o'clock. So I hope that everybody can join us again for another awesome day of learning, and it's our last day. So miigwech everybody for joining. Okay, so Bamapi, we'll see you tomorrow. Bamapi Minwa.
Have a good night, everyone.